I found the clock at a dusty little antique shop tucked between two boarded-up buildings. Its brass casing was tarnished, but the intricate engravings caught my eye. The strangest part? The hands were moving backwards. The shopkeeper, an older man with clouded eyes, seemed eager to sell it. "It's been here too long," he muttered. "Just take it for 20 quid and go." As soon as I touched it, a chill ran through me. The metal felt oddly warm, almost alive, and a faint ticking echoed louder in my ears than it should have. Curiosity outweighed my unease, so I handed over the cash and left with the clock. By the time I got home, I had convinced myself it was just a harmless antique. How wrong I was. That night, I set it on my nightstand, its ticking oddly soothing at first, but as I stared at it, the hands seemed to speed up, the reverse motion almost frantic. I only looked away for a second, but when I glanced back, the time was counting down not in hours or minutes, but days. Exactly 13 days. Sleep came in restless fits, plagued by dreams of shadows and whispers. The voice was faint at first, almost like static. "Don't waste it." When I woke up, the clock had moved. It was now sitting on my desk, though I distinctly remembered leaving it on the nightstand. My pulse quickened. I tried to laugh it off as sleepwalking, but something about the clock's placement felt deliberate. And the countdown? It was at 12 days now. The following day, strange things started happening. My phone glitched, showing cryptic messages like, "Time is slipping," and "Watch the clock." At work, I couldn't concentrate. The ticking sound was still in my head, even though ID left the clock at home. It felt like it was following me. That evening, I decided to test it. I set the clock on my kitchen counter and watched it for hours. At midnight, the hands spun wildly, then settled again. The countdown now read 11 days. Panic set in as I Googled everything I could about antique clocks and countdowns. Most results were harmless, but one forum thread stood out: the death clock, a warning. The post described a cursed clock that predicted its owner's death. Most dismissed it as urban legend, but one user claimed to have seen it firsthand. "If the time reaches 0, they wrote, it's over." Sweat dripped down my temples as I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just an elaborate prank? Maybe the shopkeeper had rigged it somehow? But then I remembered his words. "It's been here too long." What did he mean by that? And why had he been so desperate to get rid of it? Over the next few days, my life spiraled. Electronics malfunctioned around me. Lights flickered wherever I went, and the whispers grew louder. "Don't waste it," the voice repeated, clearer now. It felt less like a warning and more like a threat. I tried to get rid of the clock, leaving it in a dumpster miles away. But when I returned home, it was sitting on my kitchen table, ticking steadily. By day 8, I was barely eating or sleeping. ID covered the clock with a cloth, but the ticking seemed to seep through. My friends noticed my paranoia, but how could I explain? I finally confided in my best mate, Liam. He laughed it off at first, but his face changed when he saw the clock. "Mate, this isn't normal," he whispered. "We tried smashing it with a hammer, but the brass didn't even dent. The clock just kept ticking, the countdown relentless." "You need help," Liam said, his voice shaking. "Serious help." Desperate, I returned to the antique shop, but it was gone. In its place was an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. It was as if it had never existed. Day 6 brought new horrors. I started seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye. They didn't move like normal shadows. They flickered, darted, and loomed closer when I wasn't looking. The whispers turned into voices. "Tick-tock," they chanted. "Time's almost up." My reflection in the mirror didn't move in sync with me anymore. I tried burning the clock, throwing it into the fireplace and watching the flames engulf it. But when the fire died down, it was sitting there, untouched, on the hearth. Liam stopped answering my calls. I went to his flat, but he wasn't there. His neighbor's claimed head moved out suddenly. It didn't make sense. By day 3, the ticking had become deafening. It echoed in my skull, drowning out my thoughts. And the shadows? They weren't just shadows anymore. They had form, substance. I locked myself in my room, hoping to shut it all out. But when I turned on the light, the clock was on my desk, the countdown reading 2 days. Sleep was impossible. The voices screamed now, incomprehensible but furious. The shadows crowded the edges of my vision, their shapes twisted and monstrous. On the final day, the clock's hands stopped moving altogether. Midnight came, and with it, silence. For the first time in weeks, the ticking was gone, but the silence was worse. It was heavy, oppressive, and filled with a sense of dread. And then, the clock struck one last time, a single, resonant chime. The shadows surged forward, consuming the room in darkness. My screams were swallowed by the void, and the last thing I saw was the clock, its countdown reset to 13 days. The whispers rose to a scream as I scrambled back into the cabin, the echoes of my own name bouncing off the walls. My reflection in the glass flickered, mimicking expressions I hadn't made. I looked at my hands. They weren't mine anymore. Thin, bony, and trembling, like the hands of someone who had aged decades in a moment. The voice of the train conductor boomed over the speaker. "This is your final stop. Passengers, prepare to leave." But the windows showed nothing but endless black void. A figure appeared at the end of the aisle, tall and cloaked in shadows, its face obscured. It pointed at me, and I felt the air in my lungs freeze. As I stood paralyzed, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen showed a notification. "Would you like to continue this journey? Yes or no?" I didn't press anything, but the screen flickered, and the yes option selected itself. The train lurched forward, and I was thrown into the aisle. Crawling to my seat, I noticed something carved into the floorboards beneath me, a date. Today's date. And beneath it, the words, "This is your fault." The lights flickered again, and suddenly, every passenger turned their heads in unison toward me, their eyes empty sockets that oozed black liquid. One of them whispered, "He's still watching you," and pointed toward the window. I turned, and there he was, my reflection, grinning wickedly. My reflection mouthed words I couldn't hear, but then it started pounding on the glass from the other side. The cracks began to spiderweb outward. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The cloaked figure stepped closer, dragging something heavy behind it. A mirror, taller than any door I'd ever seen. The passengers began chanting something under their breath. It wasn't English, but I recognized one word: sacrifice. The train conductor's voice returned. "Please remain seated until your soul has been collected." The calm tone made my skin crawl. I grabbed my bag, desperate to find something, anything to break the spell of this nightmare. But when I opened it, it was filled with sand, and something moved beneath the surface. A skeletal hand emerged from the sand, clutching a ticket. My name was on it, and under the seat number, it read, "Destination Nowhere." The cloaked figure was nearly upon me now, its steps slow but deliberate. Its presence made the air feel heavy, suffocating. I darted down the aisle, past the unmoving passengers, and into another car. This one was empty, save for a single mirror at the far end. The mirror showed me standing still, though I was running. Then, my reflection started running toward me, faster and faster, until it slammed into the glass. The sound shattered my thoughts. Suddenly, I wasn't on the train anymore. I was back in my childhood bedroom. The same posters on the walls, the same creaky bed. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. My closet door creaked open, and there, in the darkness, was the cloaked figure's silhouette. It whispered my name, and I realized it wasn't coming from the closet, it was coming from under my bed. I tried to run, but the floor beneath me turned to liquid. I sank up to my knees, the room stretching and warping around me. The walls melted away, revealing the train car again. This time, every window showed my reflection, hundreds of them, each moving differently. One of them spoke, "You can't leave until you accept him." Another added, "He's been waiting for you." The cloaked figure appeared in every reflection, stepping closer and closer until it reached my real window. Its hand pressed against the glass. I felt a hand on my shoulder and spun around, but no one was there. Instead, I saw the passengers standing now, their eyeless faces turned toward me. They began to approach, their movements jerky and unnatural. One of them held a mirror shard, offering it to me. "Take it," they whispered. "Look at yourself." I didn't want to, but my hand moved on its own, grasping the shard. The moment I saw my reflection in the shard, everything went black. I heard voices all around me, whispering secrets I'd never told anyone. The train conductor's voice returned. All passengers, please prepare to disembark. The end is near. The train screeched to a halt, but there was no station, no platform, just endless darkness outside. The passengers began stepping off, vanishing into the void. The cloaked figure reached out its hand, beckoning me to follow. I shook my head, but my feet moved forward against my will. As I stepped off the train, the ground beneath me felt cold, like stone. I looked up and saw the mirror again, towering over me. This time, it showed not my reflection but a scene from my life. Me, sitting in my room, watching this very video. He sees you, the cloaked figure said. He's always seen you. I felt my heart drop. Was this real? Or had it always been real? The whispers turned into laughter, cruel and mocking, as the mirror cracked. Pieces fell away, revealing a doorway. I was pushed forward, through the doorway, into blinding light. When my vision cleared, I was back in my room. But something was wrong. My reflection in the window wasn't moving. It stared at me, grinning. As the screen of my phone lit up, a notification appeared. Do you want to continue? Beneath it, 2 options, yes or no. My finger hovered over the screen, trembling. Before I could decide, the reflection's grin widened, and the screen turned black. Then, a new message appeared. You already did. And now, here you are, watching this video. Do you feel it? The presence in the room with you? Look behind you. Go ahead, they'll wait. If you feel cold air or hear a faint whisper, don't ignore it. Comment below if you felt anything strange. And don't forget to subscribe. Hell, be watching to make sure you do. For more stories like this, check out the playlist. But be warned, once you start, it's hard to stop. He wouldn't want you to anyway.